Right, let's talk about skills-based hiring. Hi, Emily.
Hello.
Hi, Emma.
Hi.
We've got two of our experts here in hiring space. Skills-based hiring is probably arguably one of the most popular skills solutions. Lots of people are doing it or want to do it at various degrees in that journey. And it's been pretty topical over the last few months, years, as the war for talent has kind of been quite competitive. What are the key things that people need to consider if they're thinking about changing from a traditional hiring process where you're hiring for a particular job to moving more into the skills space where you're hiring people for specific skills to deliver work?
Yeah, okay, so as you said, it's becoming more popular and more popular. And I would say traditionally, sort of a job-based hiring is going to be looking at educational experience, experience in roles, job titles and things like that, whereas the skills-based approach to hiring is looking at what skills people can bring into the business. So I think with that approach, companies are sort of looking at becoming more broad with their talent pools and things like that. So that shift between sort of qualifications, experience and job titles into skills.
Yeah, exactly. You're no longer thinking, okay, well, they've got a degree and they have a background in that particular type of role. Instead, you're kind of thinking, okay, so these are sorts of skill sets that might be there. And as you say, creates this broader talent pool. It can actually like open up things like DE&I and equity. Yeah, I was actually chatting with one of our partners recently, with me, and they focus on kind of breaking down job roles into skills so that people can hire from talent pools that they wouldn't otherwise think of. So, for example, veterans, people who've been in a war, they finish, they come into society and people think that they don't have the skills necessary for a certain role because they don't have the experience. But actually, when you break down the skills, there are so many transferable and adjacent skills that people can work with, which I think just, it's just one of the benefits to skills-based hiring. I mean, there's quite a few. Do you guys have any ideas to throw into the circle?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a switch from kind of what people have done before to what they can do for an organisation. So I think if you're looking at kind of the skills an organisation needs, you can look at it a bit more holistically. Looking at skills-based hiring, you're kind of future-proofing in a way. So not looking at the particular job that you want to hire for in kind of isolation. You're looking at, for the organisation as a whole, what skills you need to bring in. So it can be really powerful in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. And also powerful for the candidate, the person applying for the job and going through the recruitment process. So I think, when they know what skills are required from that role, then they can go into that role knowing they're prepared for it. It might make the recruitment process easier because they sort of know that they can demonstrate those skills during that hiring process. And also, just once they are in the role, the engagement might be sort of easier for them and the employee experience from end to end.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're kind of hiring for skills, during that hiring process, you obviously have to kind of validate those skills, see if sort of, and depending on what kind of skill it is, how you do that can kind of vary. But I think like one of the benefits is actually then when they start, they already know, they've already tried and tested what's required for that job, and then they can start focusing on what they want to build in the next level. So recently we spoke to a practitioner who works in the retail environment, and they were trying to do some analysis to understand who their top performing staff were. They were suffering from skill shortages, high turnover rates. And when they looked into it, it was retail. So they thought, okay, we've always hired from a retail background to replace those roles. But what they actually found is that the top selling salespeople on the shop floors were actually ex-NHS nurses. And when you think about it in the context of the fact that those are actually all adjacent transferable skills, they're good at people coming into the shops, dealing with different people all day long, constant pressure, and actually what's interesting there, and I think it kind of highlights on the problem around skill shortages, is that people think that they can't hire the talent they need without really understanding what's given them those assumptions on what they actually need. So with skills approaches, there's a bit of an opportunity, isn't there, for people to rethink what they need and potentially actually hire from a more diverse talent pool.
Yeah, exactly. And using that example where they're not focusing so much on the task that someone is doing, but actually the skills and attributes which the person needs that's doing it, you're opening up into a much wider pool of people to select from by looking at the skills that they have instead of the tasks that they've done before. Actually, all of a sudden you've got loads more options in terms of filling that skills shortage.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, what you were saying earlier actually really links into it. And it's about sort of seeing gaps and understanding gaps, but also having an open mind about how those gaps are filled.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it can be really daunting for businesses as well. So I think the LACE approach, if you're sort of thinking about moving towards a skills-based organisation, would be that you sort of pilot that hiring process and sort of test a few roles or a few areas of the business with the skills-based approach.
I think that's given us a little snapshot into what it looks like in the hiring space when you think about skills versus jobs. It's obviously not everything, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and we'll be happy to help.